Okay, so remember that your test is next week. You can take it from Monday to Wednesday in any of the university testing centers. If you take it in Birch Hall, you don't need to make an appointment. If you take it elsewhere in Duncan or in South Shepler, you do need to call ahead and make an appointment to take it. If you're not on campus, you will have to come up with a proctor. Okay. This lecture, let's look at the slides titled The Constitution. First of all, the Constitutional Convention. A lot of this stuff is covered in your book. I'm not going to go over it in great detail. But look at the slide 16 about the Constitutional Convention. There were different plans. Again, this is discussed in the book, but there were different plans about how to handle representation in Congress, okay? There was the New Jersey plan, which wanted equal representation for all states. There was the Virginia plan, which wanted representation proportional to population. So in other words, one plan, the New Jersey plan, wanted every state to have an equal amount of representation, an equal number of representatives, regardless of what their population was. The other plan, the Virginia plan, wanted states with a larger population to have more representatives, okay? Which one is more democratic? Well, basing representation on population is more democratic. If you have 1 million people in your state, you should have more representatives than a state that only has 500,000 people. Otherwise, fewer people are getting the same number of representatives. So the Virginia plan, the idea of making representation proportional to population, that was really the more democratic plan. Okay, what ended up happening was the Connecticut Compromise. Basically, one house will be equal representation for all states, which will give more power to the smaller states because they'll be equal to the larger, more populous states. Okay, the other house would be representation based on population. Okay, the Senate, of course, is the one that's actually based on equal representation for all states. So really, smaller states have much more power in this arrangement because they're equal in the Senate, which is more powerful, as we've seen, or as we will see. The Senate shares treaty powers with the president, has to ratify the president's appointments to the Supreme Court, to the cabinet, things like that. So the Senate is the more powerful of the two bodies, and that's the one that is based on equality for all states. Okay, so there was something of a compromise in terms. I mean, we've already seen it wasn't designed to be a purely democratic constitution, but there was something of a compromise here where it becomes, in a way, even less democratic. Why? Because they needed as many states as possible to ratify it, including the many small states. Okay, so these states were already in existence. They had to work with them, so they had to compromise. Okay, so it wasn't necessarily. Now we'll see. Madison actually has a really good argument for why the Congress is designed the way that it is. So it wasn't a total disaster, but there is compromise with the way that things already are. Okay. Likewise, probably the most famous or infamous compromise is slavery. The southern states already had slaves, obviously, and again, they needed, as it happened, they ended up with unanimous ratification of the Constitution. They wanted something like that. They wanted as many states as possible to actually ratify the Constitution, to feel that they had agreed to the Constitution, that they really did accept it, and they were never going to do that if they got rid of slavery. Again, I think we talked a little bit, I know we did in class, I think we did on these lectures as well. In the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson actually denounced slavery as a cruel war against human nature. Jefferson, who owned slaves, denounced slavery. Franklin, who founded one of the first abolitionist societies in North America, told him to take it out because they needed the southern states' cooperation. Same here. So again, they had to compromise. Not necessarily everybody who was at the Constitutional Convention, not necessarily everyone who we think of as one of the founders necessarily wanted slavery in the Union, but they accepted, it's already there, so we have to compromise with reality to some extent. Okay? Then moving on, move up to slide 22. We'll talk a little bit about the description or the account of the different major institutions of American government in the Federalist Papers. So start with Congress and the House of Representatives, okay? And these little numbers in parentheses on the slide show which Federalist it's from. So first point is from Federalist 52, second point is from Federalist 55. So basically the representatives, the House of Representatives, so again, Congress divided into two houses, an upper body, a Senate, 100, there are now 100, two senators for every state, and then the lower body, the House of Representatives, which is based on population, and and they are elected every 2 years. Okay, and the plan there was, as the first point says, representatives will be elected every 2 years to ensure, in Madison's word, an immediate dependence on and an intimate sympathy with the people. So the idea is they would be as totally dependent on the people as possible, simply to keep their jobs, simply to be reelected. So they talked a little bit about every year, and Madison said, well, you know, that at that point it's almost ridiculous. What are you really judging them on? How much do they do in 1 year? I mean, 1 or 2 sessions of Congress. It becomes sort of silly to make snap judgments like that. Every 2 years, then it's meaningful. You've seen enough of what they're doing, but you're not letting it go for too long. So have them have to run have them have to run for re-election every 2 years, and they will be, as he puts it, dependent on the people, and therefore that will create an intimate sympathy with the people. They'll always be aware, well, what do my constituents think about this? And they'll always keep that in mind when they're voting and so on. Okay. So every 2 years, to make the people to make the representatives as dependent on the people as possible. Critics said the number of representatives were too few. They said, you know, how can you really trust somebody? You don't really know them. They're almost a total stranger. And what about all these people out here? You only have one representative for, you know, thousands of people. How does that work? And Madison was very concerned. We don't want a mob mentality. We don't want too big of a crowd in Congress. Otherwise, it becomes a mob. As he famously said, had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, the Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. In other words, however rational, however virtuous, however intelligent somebody may be as an individual, if you put them in a crowd with 1,000 other people, what you have is a mob. Even if everybody else in that crowd is equally virtuous and rational and intelligent as an individual, put them all together and something happens to people when you get them in too big of a crowd. They become a mob, and that's not what you want. You don't want mob rule. So Madison said, you know, we need to keep the numbers relatively low. We need to keep the House relatively small, so we don't end up with a big mob of people being carried away by emotion and passion and things like that and making bad decisions. Okay. Now the other thing he comes back to, and this is in slide 24, what also is, he comes back to this later on in Federalist 58, and he says, you know, the other problem with having it too big is, part of what happens in a mob is you have a few people directing the entire mob. Okay, and so he says, you know, as he puts it, the quote there, in all legislative assemblies, the greater the number of men composing them may be, the fewer will be the men who will in fact direct their proceedings. So if you have 100 representatives and they're all fairly intelligent and they're all fairly strong-willed and they can all kind of stand up to each other, you'll have genuine representation. You'll have 100 people actually, you know, arguing back and forth, deliberating, producing legislation in that way. If you have 1,000 representatives, then again you have a mob, and what happens is with 1,000 people, 100 or maybe even fewer than 100 will actually end up controlling them. They'll control information, they'll be stronger willed, they'll be more intelligent, they'll know how to basically control large numbers of people, how to basically get the assembly to vote the way that they want, how to get the House of Representatives to vote the way that they want, and because there's such a large crowd, they'll be able to hide more easily. So it'll be harder to tell who is actually directing things, but what you will get is basically something less democratic. The more representatives you get after you pass a certain tipping point, what you end up with is fewer people actually controlling all of those representatives. So it actually becomes less democratic. Not only do you have to worry about a mob mentality developing and people behaving in a really irrational way, you also have to worry about things becoming less democratic as the larger the number of representatives gets, the fewer people are actually making the decisions.